Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. So today I have with me one of my longest standing friendships. We've known each other since 2003, I think. So that's how many years now? That was maths. That's 17 or 18 years now that we've known each other. And she has been one of my dearest friends. She's been there for the major challenges in my life and the major celebrations too in my life since we got to know each other. And today we are sharing on one of the challenges that she has had to go through in her life. But before she goes on to talk about her challenge, I'm going to ask her to introduce herself, her name, and basically what she does.
Hi everyone, and thank you Aleo for having me on your channel. So my name is Lois Kange and I am the CEO of Smiley's Mobile Kitchen Limited. It's an agri-food processing business in Kaduna. We process tomatoes and other vegetables like that. So anyway, I'm a mother of 3 beautiful children, and I'm also an architect, and I used to lecture at Kaduna State University. And basically I'm now just doing what I love to do. So yes, that's about who I am. And what was the other thing you asked me?
Yeah, that's basically like on a brief who you are. I'll also put the links to her business Instagram page and her personal ones in the description box, so you can check so that you can connect with her if you have if you want to check out the businesses that she runs, or if you want to speak to her depending on her availability based on what we are going to discuss today. Okay, so we are actually going to talk about the widowhood experience, and it's a painful experience. I haven't gone through it, but you can tell that an experience like birthday is celebratory, and you can tell that one like death can be painful. So we know that it's a painful experience to go through, but I felt that it's something that would help her process it a bit more, and something that would also help somebody else process it a bit more if we talk about it. So we decided that it was a good thing for us to record this video of her saying a few things about the experience. So I wrote some things down that I want her to talk to us about, and I think it's good that we start almost from a foundation. So if you can give us a brief about your marriage, how you met him, you know, how long you've been married, like any general brief about your marriage.
Okay, so I finished school. So I read architecture, and then typically architecture you do BSc 4 years and then the masters for 2 years thereabouts before you go to serve and all that. And I was actively involved in FCS in my school days. So in my undergraduate days, I was coming out of FCS one day, and I just saw some postgraduate students. There's what they call postgraduate student fellowship, and that's PGF. It's also an arm of FCS, and they had some like 3 or 4 of their executives coming into the chapel premises while the undergraduates were so many, so we're trooping out in mass. And I just saw these 3 young men coming in, and one of them caught my attention, who eventually became my husband, Raymond Kange. And in my mind, you know, I just said, God, that's just something just clicked. I'm like, that's my husband, or something like that in my mind. And you know, I'd always been saying to my friends that when I met the right one, I would know. So even though I had people coming around me and all those kind of things, professing love, but I just felt that when I met the person for me, I would instantaneously know. And it felt like that with him. So we didn't meet. I didn't see him again for probably another year or 2, you know, and then I finished my BSc, got into the MSc program, and then also I started attending the postgraduate fellowship, because FCS was basically my life after, you know, basically, you know. So
while you were in school,
yeah, it was just everything for me. So it was like a no-brainer for me to join PGF. So when I joined, I got introduced to him. At that time, he had served as an executive, and you know, there was another set after that, but you know, I was nominated to serve as an executive, and somehow we're introduced, and that's how we became friends. And somewhere around maybe 2 years after that, just shortly after I started NYSC, we got married. So in a nutshell, that was how I met and married Raymond Kange. He was a very passionate person for Christ. He was very industrious and creative. He was in industrial design, so quite similar to, we're all creatives basically.
Yeah. I guess that probably would have helped the connection. And your wedding was in 2000 and...
Yeah, we got married in 2011. Yeah.
Okay, so you were married for about 9 years?
8 years.
8 years before he passed. And like she said in the beginning, they have 3 beautiful children. Adasa, who is the first one, and then 2 amazing boys that came after. So that's a brief about how they met. And my advice to you is join FCS, okay? Like, you need to join FCS, be part of something. I guess at the end of the day, it kind of says be part of something, because you hardly meet people just walking down the streets or something like that. So that was a good avenue. And I guess it probably helped your heart that I'm meeting this person through FCS. And so that helps you to be less worried about the kind of... I'm not saying that if you meet somebody through the church, you shouldn't verify the spirit behind them, but then it helps your heart that, okay, this person is from here, and so you're not as confused as if you met the person somewhere that you cannot vouch for.
Yeah, that's true.
So, having said that, could you tell us a little bit about how he passed?
Okay, so when I got married, I was not really doing much, I had just finished serving. It was when the period I took in, had my first child. But he was already lecturing then. He started working, first of all, as a lecturer at FC, Federal College of Education in Zaria. And then a few years after that, he got a better job at the Federal University Lafayette. So even though our home was in Zaria, he had to be kind of shuttling between Lafayette and Zaria. But then in 2016, I also got a lecturing job, I kind of thought lecturing would be my dream job and all that. And so it was, it had finally happened. And so I got a lecturing job in the Department of Architecture in Kaduna State University. So, of course, there was nothing anymore tying us to Zaria per se, apart from my business, which somehow was moved here. So we moved the family to Kaduna, which was a shorter distance for him to commute from Lafayette, Nasarawa State to Kaduna. And I also was in Kaduna with the kids, doing my lecturing as well as running my business. And one of those weekends in 2019, he was coming back home. So he would spend probably a week or two, when he gets some breather at work, he'll come back home maybe for the weekend, or if he can take a week off, that kind of a thing. That was basically how it went. And it was shortly after our 8th anniversary. So our 8th anniversary was on the 5th of November 2019. And on the 30th of November 2019, he was coming home from Lafayette, and he had already practically reached, because he was just at the outskirts. He was around Kachia side. He had already driven. He was driving himself home as usual, and he had a safe accident. He was alone in the vehicle and lost control of the vehicle, and he had the accident. The car was really bad. But he was still alive, thankfully, and we got the call. I got the call, the call that nobody wants to ever get, that call. Are you so and so? Do you know so and so? That kind of a call. And myself and my dad, we immediately drove down to the hospital there where they had taken him to. God sent some people to kind of rescue him, because when you look at the location of the accident, it was really off the road that his car went into. And God just sent these people who rescued him, took him to the hospital, and were able to meet him there and drive him down to Kaduna, where we took him to the hospital, and he could get better care. But it was a spinal injury, unfortunately. The next day, when we did an MRI, we realized it was a spinal injury that couldn't be handled there in Kaduna. He had to be taken somewhere else, probably to Kano Orthopedic Hospital. We made arrangements. To cut the long story short, he died 2 days after the accident on the 3rd of December 2019. I guess, the complication from the spinal injury, and yeah, that was basically it.
Yes, so a few things I picked from. I'm hoping that in the future she can even sit by herself without anybody there and tell this story by herself, because I feel like there are still details that cannot be said or will not be said now because of even the span of time and all of those things, but that would really really be insightful. Like, how do I put it? See, something like saying thankfully he was still alive. Some people may be blank to that gratitude of still having the opportunity to speak to the person before they finally pass, but I think it's such a testimony that even when she's recanting the story, she can still say thankfully he was still alive, even after the accident, because it gave her the opportunity to speak to him, before he passed. There's some questions that probably only he.
I think I'll need a tissue.
Yeah, I'll have to get you one. Okay, I need to pause. Sorry. I was thinking about it.
I didn't think I would, be able.
So I was saying that I feel like when she records it alone one day, maybe in her room, it's in a hotel room, nobody is there except her and God, and she's just blank. There's something about vulnerability that we learn from that we cannot learn from composure. So I feel like if she ever does it, it should be a video. So follow her on her social media, because if she ever does it, it will be a video that you should watch, because having had the opportunity to be around her during that time, I heard some things and saw some things that I felt were such a blessing even in the midst of that, and were also lessons, should I say, even in the midst of that. So I think that by saying this part, you have also reminded us of the need to be grateful for the things that we call small mercies, because it was God's mercy that somebody found him, people called, his body was not just left, he was taken to the hospital, he had the opportunity to still interact with his family, maybe say a few things, even the children got to see him again before, before he passed on. So thank you for sharing with us.
I would even just add that, it was really a blessing. Looking back, I think about the fact that, number one, we did not pick him up like Aleo said. We didn't pick him up, they didn't say, hey, come and pick up your dead body kind of thing. He was, in fact, it was almost like, God, why did you deceive us? Because he looked so like he was going to be fine. My fear was, driving to that location to pick him up. I was so scared, I didn't know, I hadn't gotten the chance to speak to him. I wasn't sure if he was actually alive or, they were just, stalling, but when I got and saw him, he was talking normally, just told me he doesn't know what happened, but he lost control, that kind of thing. I felt a bit more relieved, even though on the journey, because he couldn't move, he was obviously already, there was a problem, so we had to, just take a hand, kind of, he had a collar on his neck, just to keep him in position. That journey back to Kaduna after we picked him up was scary for me. I just kept praying and singing and, calling on God to have mercy, that kind of a thing. But when we got to the hospital and he was stabilized, people came around, church members praying. There was so much hope. And I actually did not at that point think that it was going to be something that would lead to death. We talked a lot, those period, but not talking in the sense of going. It was more like, thank God, whatever, even if it means that you're going to live the rest of he said it that he doesn't mind, he says God, as long, even if he is a paraplegic or whatever, as long as he gets to serve God, shared some insight that God had given him. He was somebody that, was sound in the faith. That very day he was coming back home, he was fasting. He lived a fasted life, I would say that, and for me and for us in the family, he was more like a pillar of strength, because he was the one that, if anybody of the two of us, he was more of the prayer warrior. He was more of the, when it comes to relating with God, he was, the one that was really there in the forefront. Not that I was a Christian or nominal by any standards, but he was, I would say, he had a deeper connection with God. And just a few days before he had come home, a day or so before he was coming home, he called some of his graduating students. That's one thing again he was passionate about, his work. He didn't just do it because of the pay. He did it with all of his mind and heart. He felt like these students were an investment that he had to make, kind of. So,
like even a spiritual investment.
Yeah, not just a physical investment. So he had a personal relationship with his students, he was the kind of lecturer you could go to if you had a problem, even if it was financial or whatever, or whatever about your faith. He was that kind of open person. So he had called his students, and just talked with a couple of them. They were the graduating states working on their projects and all that, and then he just called them and was talking to them. I didn't get to know any of this till the burial, and these students, some of them were actually the ones giving us this testimony by themselves, not even my husband,
So you can see that the person is not saying it to make it look good. It's somebody else talking.
Yeah, so he actually spoke with a couple of them, and all those people gave their lives to Christ. I think it was just one that didn't give his life to Christ, and that one was already like a student pastor. So I don't know how many, I can't remember the number of them. There were more than 4, they gave their lives to Christ. And for me, there's almost no better way to die than to die with, this to show God that I have lived my life. I have, souls or lives to show, that have been saved as a result of me speaking to them or whatever. And for us, those were some of the consolations, and the fact that the children got to see their dad on Monday. He passed on a Tuesday. On that Monday, after school, my mom brought the children to see dad. None of us thought it would lead to death, but she was like, okay, since we're going to Kano for this surgery, we don't know how long your dad is going to be there. So you guys come and see daddy and say hi to him, usually when daddy comes, he's coming back home with Smarties and all those things. So they hadn't gotten the chance to see him when he returned because of the accident. So she just brought them over to kind of like say hi before we go for the surgery the next day. But essentially that was it. But still, I'm grateful that they got to see. They have so many strong, vivid memories of their dad. He had such a, strong relationship with each and every one of them. Yeah, he was a present dad and all that. And in retrospect, you see, the way he lived his life, you just wonder if he knew, that he had such a short life to live. But of course, I guess he chose, he had some things that he needed to fulfill before he went. And I'm grateful to God that he was able to achieve a lot of that,
I think that in living his life, it shows us an example of how we can be Christians in the workplace, because we almost assume that we are Christians in the morning when we do our devotion, at night when we do our devotion, and then on Sundays, or if we go to the church for Bible study or something. But clearly, that's not what we are called to. Soul winning, like, it's a major part of our Christian calling, and it's encouraging for me to see someone, or to have known somebody who went to work not just as a lecturer, but somebody who was mindful of the destinies of the people that were entrusted in his hands. And it's such a blessing to me to hear that, because it's almost like, when you think about it, something to remind you. It's almost like a real life example. So like, the biblical example are great for us. You can almost make examples that maybe it was in those times that kind of thing, that preaching or soul winning, even in unexpected places, was possible. But then it shows that it's still possible today to walk in those things that the Bible calls us to walk in. So the next thing that I felt that may be good for you to talk about is, what was your first reaction to his passing? Like, what was it like when maybe the doctor called you, or the nurse, or someone called you and said, okay, you know what, that's it?
I don't think anybody even told me that's it, per se, because that morning when we were about to leave for Dala, somehow in the night, some things just took a turn for the worse, and he started, somebody that was so calm, he was, all this while he was really calm, his normal way, he's always calm. Like, my husband was somebody that even if there is a storm outside and you're there's a storm, he was just like, okay. He was so calm. He was just this very calm person. And so when he was starting to get a bit worked up, I was concerned. He was not really agitated, but he was like, you guys need to hurry up, let's go to the car, the driver is already, let's get going, you don't know how I'm feeling, kind of. So I'm like, okay. So, just, he was uncomfortable, basically. And we had to call the doctors in. Of course, the doctors had to come in to even see him before we move on that journey, because the ambulance were there, the nurses to go with us were there, and all my brother-in-law and myself were going to go on that journey as well. But when they came in and looked at him, probably they had already seen something, but they didn't want to say. But then they were like, okay, Ash, we need to move him for another x-ray before we go. Kind of. So I had to start running around to go and make the payments and all that to set up the x-ray, whatever. And at some point I got just to encourage him, came near, how are you? He said he's doing, just managed to respond, and I was like, don't worry, you're going to be fine, that kind of thing. But I still didn't think, that was the end, because if you looked at him on that hospital bed, he looked very okay. Yeah, he looked normal. He didn't look, of course, it's a spinal injury, so no physical injuries like that. And probably because of his nature, you didn't get to see the gravity of what was happening. So I went, and when I came back into the room at some point, I noticed he was looking upwards, facing the lights, and all this while he'd been like, oh, switch off the lights, because of course he's in the position like that, facing up. He didn't want the light reflecting his eyes and all that. And so most times he will even close his eyes like he's sleeping, just so that the light is not in his face and in his eyes like that. But when I came in at that point, one of my church mamas was there with him while I was doing all that, and he was facing up with his eyes open. And I'm like, wait, something is wrong. Something just instantaneously told me something is wrong. And I started screaming. I started crying, and my dad was just out, talking with the doctors and all that. And he had this expression like, what is this? More like an irritated expression. Why can't you just calm yourself down? Nothing is happening, kind of. Because none of us expected it, that's the truth. So, they kind of pulled me out, they came, they brought in oxygen, I put on him and all that. I just knew something was wrong. I was screaming and crying and all that, even before, I just knew something was wrong. He didn't look, his eyes were open, his eyes was up. I don't know how to describe the feeling, but my heart told me that something was wrong. And it just felt like you had been hit with a sledgehammer in your stomach or in your gut. Like, I don't know how to describe the feeling, but it's like you've been run down with a trailer. You can almost physically feel the pain of knowing that, that person is no more. Like, yeah, you can't describe it. Sure, you can. So anyway, the first reaction that you have is, I think, after the initial pain for me, it was a numbness. It was just a numbness, like you're just going through the motions. You're not really seeing anybody per se or hearing anything per se. You're just there, but you're not there. You're just in a haze or a world of your own, kind of. And truth is that it just takes God and the grace of God to get you through that, because I don't know what I would have done differently. There's no way to prepare for death. There's no way to really say you have prepared yourself for death, but it's just to pray that God gives you the strength and the grace to be able to get through it. Because it's not even a phase that, so yes, the initial pain and then the numbness and then the grief, but sometimes it doesn't just go away. It's a long process of healing. And sometimes you feel like, I've dealt with this, I've moved on, the pain is no more there, but sometimes it just comes again and hits you, that kind of thing. But yes, by the grace of God, you get through it. You get by. And that is why I think it is very important to have people praying with you and praying for you. You don't just know how far those prayers go. For me, when people look at me, sometimes they say, like, you bounce back so almost immediately and all that, and you're a strong woman. And I just laugh, because I know that it is definitely not me. It's not in me. It is, the prayers of the saints that have really, really helped to uphold me, through this whole phase.
Wow. Like, I'm here holding my tissue, but I'm like, you better hold it in peace. Don't add.
Oh my God.
I just feel like she's even so strong to be willing to even do this, because, man, it can't be easy, because no. I remember when I came to Kaduna then, to see her, and then she looked strong, as you would say of somebody who is grieving, but then you could also sense that something had been removed, should I say, like something has been, so in that moment I just always worried, like, God, please, how does this person move on? How do they hold up? What happens now? And all of those kind of things. And woo, I'm just grateful to God that she's able to wake up every morning and say, what do I do today for my children? What do I do today for the church? What do I do today, for women in business? What do I do today for, because if she didn't have God at her own core, and if she didn't have people praying for her, I feel like she would just be on the bed, just there and be like, what next? Where do I go to from now? Very, 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 very unexpected. It wasn't sickness, that was long-lived, and even the accident, he wasn't in the hospital for up to a week.
No, just 3 days.
Yeah.
2-3 days.
So there was no emotional planning of, it looks like this is coming or something like that. It was almost like, and then it was like sudden, should I say. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is, if you can talk together about what it was like dealing with the burial and then the grief after you had come back from the burial.
Yeah, so for my own situation was pretty much easy, I would say, because even though most of it I was just going through the motions, but I feel like from the stories I've heard about, women who lost their husbands and all that, I feel like my own, process was very, very simplified. Yes, there were 1 or 2 challenges, but it was pretty much a seamless experience for us. I had supportive in-laws, and the children too. God just helped them, to be able to somehow go through that process with me. My last born was just 3 years, when he passed.
The oldest was about 7, yeah?
No, my last one was Kavlen was
about
2 years. It was 2 years, going on 3. He was going to be 3 in a few months, and
the first was 7. Now was she not 7 then?
Yeah. So basically, they're still small,
6.
but they were able to, somehow, will I say, be strong? Because even the last born that was, throwing his own tantrums, it wasn't bad. It wasn't something that was overwhelming for me. And and then we didn't get to spend so long a time away from, where we're based in Kaduna, in the village. We had to travel to Benue, to his village in Mbaduku in Vandikia. we didn't get to spend so long a time that so basically within a week or thereabouts we're back to our base in Kaduna. There was, my family is very supportive, you know, and so we were surrounded with love. And that really, really, really helped. And of course it was more like I would wake up every night and cry, you know. So for people grieving, it's not when people are around, you know. The hurt is always, you know, when you're alone, you know, or when the people that have come to commiserate with you, whatever, have gone.